Hello, my name is Claude Albertario. In this video, I'll be presenting my point of view on the scoring differences between stage N2 and N3. So to begin, we must revisit Rechtschaffen and Kale's scoring manual. From the original R&K slow wave sleep footnotes, we can see the statement an attempt should be made to distinguish between spontaneous K complexes and delta waves, although this distinction is not always easy. This forced the scorer to visually extract K complexes from the field of delta activity and only accrue the non-K complex slow wave activity time. This truly was an art form. A large amount of the slow wave activity present is actually comprised of K complexes. This made it very hard to extract the relevant feature set from visual recognition. From the current Academy scoring rules, we see that now slow wave activity are waves with a frequency of 0.5 to 2 Hertz, so they include the delta, some of the delta range, and they're called SWA, slow wave activity, with a peak-to-peak amplitude of greater than 75 microvolts, measured over the frontal regions. That's a key thing because we can see that the frontal region is a very higher possibility of picking up high level voltage, especially during sleep. So we note that K complexes would be considered slow waves if they meet the definition of slow wave activity. So here we see K complexes, 5 different K complexes. I strung them along here to show what they would look like if they were just in series K complexes, and here they are in isolation by themselves, one after the other. Just to show that K complexes can have different overall morphologies, but they have the basic underlying structure of it. Negative spike followed by a positive potential. The visual rules from the current Academy scoring rules also recognize that there is the need to have standardization as to where the scorer is going to be scoring data from. And what I mean is that here is where we actually find the instruction that says we should be using the EEG from the right hemisphere as our primary source of information. The left hemisphere is to be used as a backup. I find that many people incorrectly display both left and right EEG channels during scoring. This forces them to accrue slow wave activity across the two channels, the two frontals, and that's not the way it should be. Not only that, I also see people accruing slow wave activity across frontal and central derivations. This also is not the way we're supposed to accrue slow wave activity. Qualified slow wave activity for the purposes of N3 determination should only be determined from the right frontal derivation, or if that's not available, then the left frontal. If that's not available, right central, and so on. The point being, slow wave activity is to be accrued from only one channel, and it should be the right frontal. Moving along, I'll be presenting a string of 30-second epochs from a recording that showed some very pivotal epochs of N3 slow wave activity for N3 determination. Here we see the standard description of the EEG of different sleep patterns. In effect, what we're doing during sleep scoring is we perform two simultaneous visual feature extraction techniques. We see the frequency and the voltage at the same time. We're looking for slower to faster, with sleep being slower, and higher to lower, with our deeper sleep getting higher voltage compared to our lighter sleep, which is typically lower voltage. Here we see the slow wave activity recognition pattern, and even though that the voltage may be slow enough, it has to be large enough to be scored as N3 slow wave sleep. Sort of like taking your kids to the amusement park, where some of them might have the fortitude to go on the ride, but they do not meet the height restriction. And N3 is definitely a roller coaster, but it's really tough when you don't meet the metric to go on the ride. So what we see in a classic page of sleep recording, here we have a montage that has eyes on top, followed by 3 right hemispheres, and then the EKG and heart rate. In the EEG channels, we see 2 lines per channel. These are each set at 37.5 microvolts, so the span between them is 75 microvolts, making a handy ruler for the channel. And typically the EEG pattern rotates around the 0 point, so we can expect to find the waveforms to be 75 microvolts about the 0. I will point out an inconsistency in this sleep software, though. I am using Alice 4 here, and no matter how many times I flipped the channel's polarity, I still ended up with this negative point, this negative marking on the bottom of the channel. Now, when I flipped it, I don't have an example, but when I flipped it, this waveform and these waveforms all turned upside down, so I know the polarity was actually being changed, but the description was not. Now I know through my experience that this is the way the K-complex, this waveform would appear during the night in the typical negative up, positive down scenario for a channel. So even though this says negative is down, I'm leaving this in this display setting because this is the way I feel this waveform should be depicted. The first epoch is a classic N2 epoch with low voltage mixed frequency in the majority of the epoch. This mixed frequency low voltage activity is akin to a smooth paved road. I call this a nice smooth paved road with only a few bumps. Clear K-complexes can be seen throughout the epoch, right? We have one here, down over here. Towards the latter third of the epoch, we see the EEG start to get slow and increase in voltage. This can be thought to be akin to a rough, bumpy road. So here we're starting to get bumpy. The portion of the epoch that meets the N3 threshold is underlined in red, but does not meet the time criteria of 20% of the epoch, or a total of 6 seconds. 30-second epoch, 20%, 6 seconds. Next epoch, we see the EEG deepening. Our previous paved road has given way to a bumpy road. There is clearly a greater variance to the voltages within this epoch. K-complexes and spindles can be seen. It is clearly an N2 epoch. We still do not achieve 6 seconds of N3 activity. Here we're still getting rough. We still don't get 6 seconds, 20% of our epoch. Next epoch breaches the 75 microvolt threshold for just over 6 seconds. So it is scored N3. By the way, I would love for a sleep software vendor to enable us to draw N3 time on the screen and have the computer accrue slow wave activity time for N3 determination. How easy would that be to score slow wave sleep? You just boop, 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 tag the periods in the epoch that you want to call slow wave activity, and it would accrue how much time you've underlined. But alas, I'm just a single voice in the wind. This epoch lowered voltage, and only a few waves breached the 75 microvolt threshold, less than 6 seconds. So this epoch remained N2. Even though it looks pretty deep and pretty rough and bumpy, it still didn't breach, enough of them breached the 75 microvolt threshold. Here we have a heavy, I call this a heavy epoch because we have this huge large voltage over here, though it doesn't accrue enough time, even with all of that, to be 6 seconds. So that's interesting in that it still stays at N2, especially since there's a little bit of arousing going on over here. In this epoch, again, might be slow enough, but this is the kid who doesn't meet up to the bar at the amusement park. It's not tall enough. Definitely within the band of the ruler. Here N2 is not enough again, not enough qualifying waves. I'm sure some of you will write back and say, oh, but I disagree with this and that, and over here I don't think you'd find enough to actually push this over the 6-second mark. And here's just enough qualifying waves. So this is between the two of them, we have just enough on each side of the threshold. Clearly N3. Slightly more than the minimum amount of N3 needed here, but in big chunks. Nice train of slow wave activity. Again here, it's staying consistently synchronous, keeping that brain firing away. Here also, just enough qualifying waves here. Just enough. I mean, really have to get in there and count this. What's interesting is that this one is actually not slow enough to qualify, since it actually looks more like a vertex wave. Comes back down to the same point, faster. I don't consider that to be a slow waveform. Here we have clear N3. Clear N3 again. We're almost at the end. Clear N3 again. Clear N3 again. And that's it. I will go back to here. Fortunately, there is an algorithm to determine the height and relative weight of the EEG tracings. It is called Z ratio. In future videos, I will be elaborating on this way to quantify the EEG along both the frequency and voltage domains simultaneously. To whet your appetite, I will briefly explain. Here we see the original sleep-wake continuum as published by Dement and Wills Webb and others. And they described this spectrum of sleep to wake. Taken from that, this was put together under the Upjohn Company, under the Current Concepts series back in the 70s, if not 60s. I think 70s. And this was the description of the waveforms. Z ratio depicts the global EEG predominance like a compass for our EEG. Is there more slow or more fast? And while it's taking into consideration the voltage, it's also taking into consideration the frequency of that voltage. So you end up with a value, an index, that takes into account the relative contribution of the slow frequencies versus the fast frequencies. And it does it in short 1-second increments. So an informational description can be seen at the link here. Any comments, suggestions, requests, please address them to email. And that's it. Thanks for listening, and I hope we can meet again in the future. The Somnonnaut series is pleased to provide these items of interest for very high stress issues. N2, N3, I think, is a lot of problems with scoring, and techs have a problem with an issue. I know I still have a problem with that after 30 years of scoring. So, thank you very much.